Hello everyone, my name is Lucas Monserrat and I'm an architect and master student in urbanism in the postgraduate urbanism program at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Today, I will present a research called Rio de Janeiro Railway Voids, an opportunity for urban regeneration, conducted by me and Professor Gonçalo Henriques. The research aims to present the railway void as areas with high potential for urban regeneration and improving the quality of life of the inhabitants, particularly in the periphery of Rio. The study proposed an analytical method for these voids, aiming to extract relevant data for future urban projects in these areas. 1. Theoretical and conceptual framework. Since the formation of the first urban centers, the relationship between built spaces and voids has become a subject of urban planning. As we can see in these two maps, the two cities have been consolidated through extremely different relationship with the voids. In Parma, the first image, the voids are shaped by the buildings, whereas in Saint-Dié, it is the defining element itself. To further illustrate how these relationships can be distinct, we conduct the study with the urban fabrics of four different cities: Barcelona, New York, Brasília, and São João de Meriti. Here we can observe that in Barcelona voids are distributed within the blocks, while in New York the Central Park serves as a major void to compensate for the lack of other open spaces. In Brasília, the void plays a preeminent role in urban planning due to the modernist thinking. In the São João de Meriti, it's the third most densely populated city in Brazil right now, where one of the few vacant areas is the transportation infrastructure, as we can see in this image. Thus, because of these different relationships, how can we identify voids in urban form? In the urbanism field, voids have different meanings, classifications, and types. Therefore, we have identified several types of voids found in the contemporary cities. The first one, in between lots. The second, abandoned or underused buildings. The third one, large rural voids. The fourth, voids into urban planning. And the last one, the large mobility infrastructure voids. And here is where the work seeks to focus. Here, we bring as an example the reality found in the periphery of Rio de Janeiro, where the railway void is in a situation of abandonment and underutilization. These spaces are often one of the only free areas in the cities that lacks with quality public spaces. Seeking to take advantage of the potential of these spots, why not think in an improvement of the urban environment through these voids? 2. The research goal and the context. MRS Logística S.A. Railway. Here we have the location of the city of Rio de Janeiro in your metropolitan area in the context of the world, of Brazil, and the state of Rio de Janeiro. Through these three maps, we can see the importance of the railway network for the evolution of the city of Rio de Janeiro and the others around it. We can see that over the years the urban area has followed the railway path originating in neighborhoods and cities. However, in the early 1990s, because of a political option to privilege the transport through highways, this large railway network is nowadays part of underused and even abandoned, as we saw earlier. From this other map, we can see that all a part of that old railway network is active today and corresponds only to three railways. The main ones are the Ramal Supervia in blue and the MRS Logística S.A. in pink. While the Supervia is intended for passenger transportation, MRS Logística S.A. is intended for freight transportation from the ports of Rio de Janeiro and Itaguaí. However, the vast majority of the freight transported by this railway is iron ore, which has its base in the port of Itaguaí, making this section of the railway that connects to the port of Rio de Janeiro with little movement and underused. Because of this, when we look at the voids, we can find two distinct realities in Rio. The first is the passengers railway void, with walls, large transit stations, and electrical infrastructure. And the second one is the freight railway void, where the railway has a totally different relationship with the city around it since it has no walls, a slow flow of trains, and no electrical infrastructure around it. Then, we decide to focus on the freight railway context, and we have the question, how can architecture react? For this, we try to analyze existing projects and railways from different contexts in order to understand different projects' outputs and how it could be relevant to the reality of Rio de Janeiro. We selected 3 projects, each one with their own particularity. The first one is the Gladesdrake Park in Berlin, Germany. Here we have a large park with the preservation of the railway memories and the track. The second one is the Cuernavaca Railway Linear Park in Mexico City, Mexico. Here, the use of an existing railway tracks for the implementation of cyclopaths was really impressive. And the third one is the Cajuru Community Garden. Here we have the implementation of a community gardens and social projects with the local inhabitants. Through this analysis, we were able to create a repertoire of design strategies and solutions that helped us in making decisions for the following stages of the research. 3. Methods and processes. At this point of the research, we can characterize the study context of the MRS Logística S.A. Railway by 3 main bases. The first one, the peripheral area, the second, the densely populated cities, and the third, the lack of public spaces. This is very important because some authors like Farias 2012 argue that the periphery operates in a different urban logic from the metropolis. In these places, the rapid changeability of urban space, morphological diversity, and lack of urban regulation by the state make the periphery a place to difficult design diagnosis. Which brings us to the following question. How to analyze the railway void to extract relevant parameters for the urban design in the periphery. Thus, the work is structured in the thought presented by Farias 2012 and Esterly 2014. In the first one, Farias argues that to carry out a project in the periphery situation, we must opt for a process of a systematic analysis capable of encompassing the different layers and scales of the peripheral space. On the other hand, Esterling argues that infrastructures operate on a software logic formed by a chain sequence of codes, and each code has their own programmatic disposition and consequently a urban design potential. For this reason, in order to discover the urban design potentials of the MRS Logística S.A. railway void, we carried out a morphological mapping of the void in question, structured in 3 main stages. A. Void morphology identification. B. Data analysis. And C. Informed design guidelines. In this map, we can see the section of the railway mapped between the municipalities of São João de Meriti and Nova Iguaçu, with approximately 19 kilometers and a half. However, due to the large scale of the railway extension, one more question is presented: how to analyze a huge railway void, section by section, connecting the void. Here, we can find the railway divided in 4 sections that together form the totality of the studied stretch. And then, the 5 categories that we mapped. The first one is thresholds and boundaries. The second, level crossings. The third, vegetation and topography. The fourth, demographic density. And the fifth, land use. For the first one, thresholds and boundaries, we have identified 13 different situations of railway voids. Its distinct morphologies may represent or not design obstacles for future urban interventions. In blue, there are no obstacles. The yellow scale represents obstacles in only one side and the red scale on both sides. When we look at the map, we can see that even with a large amount of blue and yellow stretches, the void does not behave in a continuous way, with certain discontinuity. However, when we look at the graph, we could see that approximately 64% of the railway represents area with less design obstacles, presenting itself as areas for possible interventions. In the category of level crossings, we have identified 4 types that we can see through the length of the railway. 3 are planned by the urban projects, while 1 is spontaneous, created by the population. This map is very important for us to see where people need level crossings the most by the yellow ones that represent the spontaneous level crossings. This is a very important clue if you want to see where people want to cross and also the necessity of the inhabitants. In this graph, we can see one more time the great difference between the planned and spontaneous level crossings, revealing for us that the planned level crossings that exist right now are not enough. In the vegetation and topography map, we used infrared images from satellites that showed us the current vegetation cover of the region. Here, it's possible to see that the closer to the city of Rio we are from section A to D, the vegetation decreases because of the constructive and population density near to the Carioca metropolis. In this graph, we can see the progressive decrease in vegetation cover as we approach the city of Rio. Although we start with a high vegetation cover in the section A, at the end, only 8% of the section D has vegetation. Number 4. Demographic density. As in the previous category, in the section A to D, population density increase, showing a graded occupation in the vicinity of the railway and mostly in the sections C and D, as we can see in the red scale. We can also say that when it's related to the category of vegetation and topography, it's possible to see the relationship between the decrease in the vegetation cover and the increase in the population density in the territory. By this graph, we can see the increase of the orange and red colors as we go through the sections A to D. Finally, we have the category of land use. Here, we analyze the total of 691 buildings that are built within the railway voids of EMRS Logística S.A. Through this analysis, we found that there are clusters of buildings in specific parts of the railway, mostly for residential occupations, as we can see at the bottom. This graph shows that of the 691 buildings analyzed, 624 are from residential use, corresponding to 90% of the total. This shows above it all a housing deficit in the region since the railway void should not be occupied by the Brazilian law. Thus, after these mappings, we are able to extract some guidelines for future urban projects. Proposed guidelines: 1. Global network intervention. 2. Qualify space in general, voids in particular. 3. Invest public spaces and community spaces. 4. Environmental restoration and green mobility. 5. Increase level crossings and tactical urbanism. And 6. Regenerate existing buildings and services. Talking about land regeneration, here we have as one of the greatest discoveries of the research the presence of this cluster of buildings, which were mentioned earlier. These clusters are found in the extended parts of the railway where there were once former train stations. Due to the housing deficit of the region, these spaces have been increasingly occupied, generating a unique relationship with the public and private space, opening precedents for the exploration of the urban potential of these voids. For this reason, when we talk about the global network interventions, we found interesting to think of a global network where the project could not only take advantage of these existing centralities and relations, but also link them to the territory through the connective potential of the railway. Another relevant action is the use of techniques of tactical urbanism for the improvement of the level crossings and the population participation in the creation of new ones. Tactical urbanism has been successful in carrying out similar interventions, as we can see in the image on the right of the Rio Mais Pedestre, a project in Rio de Janeiro. We also have that currently the population itself already uses the railway void as a public space. The future urban project should respect this preexistence and relations with the community in the maintenance and implementation of new public spaces. Two other major project contributions would be the use of the railway void for vegetation recovery and the implementation of a bike lane to encourage green mobility and the connectivity in the city. The image presented the Cuernavaca Railway Linear Park and shows how the project used the regional railway path for this implementation and also for the vegetation recovery. And finally, we'd like to conclude with the understanding that the railway void, in certain contexts, has a high transformative potential and an important social role, being able to encompass different layers of urban design, acting in the improvement and regeneration of the peripheral space. And I'd like to thank you so much, and if you have some questions, do not hesitate to email us.